Upaka Ratnaika, and he's Professor of Civil Engineering, the Department of Civil Engineering and Construction in ATU, and Professor Yukobo Hoshima is the Department of Electronic Engineering in the University of Technology in Japan. The title of their presentation is Unveiling Key Factors Influencing Student Grades Through Explainable AI. Each speaker has 15 minutes to speak, and then we'll have, if possible, we'll have 5 minutes question time.
Right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Namal Ratnaika from the University of Tokyo. Today, I'm very excited to present one of our research that we conducted with the help of Professor Upaka Ratnaika from ATU and also Professor Yukinobu Hoshino from Cochin University of Technology, Japan. It's about the education and the cutting edge technology. So the name is the Unveiling Key Factors Influencing Student Grades Through Explainable AI. Before I go to the next slide, let me explain the background and the reason behind why we have conducted this study and what we are expecting through this study. So we know that education plays a crucial role shaping our future. So in that sense, we can also say the future is the education. If you don't have the good education system, we will still be in the Stone Age. We will never improve our technologies and so on. So right now we are in the age of AI and machine learning. So we have to find what are the key factors, the key components that influence the student grades. What I mean is, as the student grades mean the students' performance, the improvement of the education system. So in the traditional methods, they have already given us some clues, like what kind of factors are giving us these influencing factors. But with the rise of machine learning and AI, now we have tools at our disposal to give the remarkable accuracy to predict student grades. Why we are not using it? But there's a catch. The thing with machine learning and AI is that it works as a black box. We have a data set, we use it, we input that data into the machine learning model or AI model, then we have the output. The problem here is we don't know what happens inside the model. It's a black box. So how can we understand what factors did it affect to give that output? So in order to address that problem, that challenge, people have introduced several methods. One can be SHAP, one can be LIME. In our study, we are using LIME. LIME means local interpretable local interpretable model agnostic explanations. So using that tool, what we are trying to do is we will input our data set, the input variables, the input factors into the model, and then we get the output. Now we have the model. We analyze this model to understand what gives the most influence factor. What is the best one? What makes, we take a student, and if that student is passed for one subject, and for that subject, what gave the best prediction accuracy from which factor? So this is the basic idea, basic objective of this study. So moving on, let me explain our experimental scenario, like the experimental methodology, starting from the dataset selection and the methodology and results, and then how we can get insights from that results. So the data set. For our study, we have actually selected several data sets, around 7, but from that, this data set seems very interesting because this data set has like exciting influencing factors that they have considered. These factors they have collected from a survey. So from if I go one by one, like we have free time. So what they have done is they take one student and he can get the data from like asking how much free time do you have to do this work, and then like what's the age of him or she, and the address and the parent status, like is the parent like a divorce or single or like together or living together or something, or is he or she in a romantic relationship, and the absence for the school, and also something like father's education and father's job, and also like does he also participate for paid classes, and how much school support is given to him, and what's the health status, and how many failures before he had in his past, and those kind of things. So altogether, even I put here around 20, there are 30 influencing factors that they have considered. So these are the inputs to our model. So some can say like independent variables, or some can say like influencing factors. Like in machine learning, we call it inputs to the model. And then moving on to the outputs, we have 3 outputs. In this case, we could develop 3 different models because we have G1, G2, G3. What does it mean by G1? G1 is the results, the pass or fail rate for the first period. And the G2 is the second period, and G3 is the final period pass or fail rate. So using this data set, we have developed 25 different machine learning models. So this is our methodology. Starting from the data set processing, what we have done is, like usually in machine learning, we do cleaning and the pre-processing the data set, and then we handle the missing values, we normalize it or standardize numerical features, and then we encode the categorical features into numerical data, and then we use it as our data set for the system. Then moving on to the model training, as I mentioned before, we use 25 different machine learning models. Why? Because some can be biased, some can be working really well, some can have like really low accuracy level, because each of the models behave very different ways for each of the different data sets. So in that case, we train 25 different machine learning models. For an example, linear regression, decision trees, random forest, gradient boosting machines, neural networks, and so on. So we did the model training by like dividing into training and testing set for the whole data set. And then we used the training set to train the data set. And then we tested it using the test data set. The accuracy was we use accuracy as the metrics to evaluate the model. And then we have the model interpretation. As I mentioned before, we used line. We use the line because it can give us like each variable, each factor, how much it is contributing to each of the model. So I will show it like in the next slides, like how each of these factors have contributed to the model. Then as the final step, we analyze and we have gained some insights. So moving on to the results, what we have here is we have 3 different results for 3 different outcomes. For the G1 is the first output, which is the first period grade. In our data set, we had it for the numerical value from starting from 0 to 20. So the marks it was given from 0 to 20. So we converted into pass-fail scenario, which is a classification model. So we took it as 0 to 10 as fail and 10 to 20 as pass. From that, give a second. From that conversion, we use that data set for the whole 25 different machine learning models and selected the best 6. So in this graph, you can see I mentioned like 6 different machine learning models starting from Gaussian, naive Bayes, kernel based, naive Bayes, and SVM kernel, coarse tree regression, and medium Gaussian SVM, logistic regression kernel. So each of these models, they worked perfectly. You can see the testing accuracy for Gaussian naive Bayes is around 87.5. Moving on, 85.94 for kernel naive Bayes, and the least is here is logistic regression. Still, it has 84.38. So moving on to the next output, which is G2, the second period grade. That is also we converted into classification problem by converting 0 to 10 as fail and 10 to 20 as pass. Again, we selected best 6. Here, the best model was not naive, not the one that we had before, which is Gaussian naive Bayes, but we have medium Gaussian SVM for the best results with 87.5% accuracy for the testing. And then moving on to the next ones like SVM kernel, coarse tree, linear regression, SVM, and the boosted trees and efficient linear SVM. So still, you can see it has more than 80% of accuracy for all of these models. Moving on to the last model, for G3, which is the final pre-period grade, again, we converted into classification problem. Now we can see the same model which performed really well in G1 comes as the first in this case, which is kernel naive Bayes at 90.63 accuracy. And then the others followed up like boosted trees, coarse tree regression, binary GLM logistic regression, efficient logistic regression, and efficient linear SVM. So the next thing what we have to do is to try to find the influencing factors. That's our main objective. So we don't have to use Lime for every model that we developed. What we want to do is we want to find it for the best model because the best model gives the best results. So now we have the like concrete conclusion. Okay, this data set works with the many different machine learning models, which means data set is solid. And the best algorithm in this case is kernel naive Bayes. So what we have done is we use kernel naive Bayes model and use the final G3 results and put it into Lime. So I told you there are around 30 different factors, influencing factors in our data set. But in this case, I have selected few, the best few from that set. So starting from want to take higher education has the highest influencing factor giving the prediction accuracy with 3.04. And the number of past failures also has highest, but in negative, 2.74. And moving on to the next one, what student school? So I forgot to mention the student school means here is that this data set is based on two different schools. So they have selected two different schools. So they have like, let's say A school and B school. Depending on the school also, the prediction, the accuracy of passing accuracy depends. Moving on to the student's guardian. This guardian can be mother, father, or other. So this also affects the model to have a positive prediction. And then we have reason to choose this school. So there can be several reasons for a person to select a school. It can be close to the school, or it can have good courses, or the reputation and some other factors. So depending on that also has the positive impact for the model to predict if that person is pass or fail. And interestingly, mother's job has negatively impacted the model. So in this data set, the mother's job can be teacher, civil servant, or health worker, or like no job. So this Lime values has generated for one person from the like randomly selected one person from that sample area. So that person's mother had the job in health department. So what happens is the model has trained from the whole data set from our training data set. And in this case, in this sample, why the mother's job has affected as negative can be because she can be really busy with health department. I don't know, maybe. So we can give different conclusions for each of these predictors. And also there can be like the next one is like weekly study time. So increasing the weekly study time can give us like higher accuracy of passing rate, and students' home address and father's education, interesting, and internet access at home. So moving on, let's try to get some insight from this LIME output. The desire from all the above LIME values, the summary of this LIME is the desire to pursue higher education is the strongest positive predictor of passing. That's very interesting, right? Like if you want to like have higher education, of course, they will work hard. We can like, it's common sense. Okay, while the number of past class failures is the strongest negative predictor. Yeah, it's also like reasonable influencing factor. And moving on, factors like school environment, guardian support, and motivation for choosing the school plays important roles, as we saw earlier. And interestingly, parents' education level and certain job types seems to have negative effects, possibly due to unexamined cultural or familial pressure. So, as the conclusion of my study, what we have done is we have used 25 different AL and ML models, and then we have consistent of higher performance for naive-based models, and support vector machines as versatile. You saw it for G1, G2, G3 results, like it was everywhere. Like anyway, it was at the best 6. Then boosted trees, coarse tree, and are reliable alternatives. And LIME was analyzed based on the best performing model. And for the LIME, what happened is we have aspiration for higher education as a key driver of success, and impact of past academic performance, and school environment and guardian support matter, and parental education is a complex role, and targeted intervention for at-risk students. So this study does not end here, because this is only for that data set. This differ from one to one. Like if you do this for ATU, it's totally different. So I will stop my presentation because my time is up with the conclusion as like we can actually do something like this. We don't need the knowledge of AI or ML or LIME or anything else. We have it already developed. If you have MATLAB, you have it everything. I mean, I did this like within 2 or 3 days, like the examination and the experiment. So I am inviting everyone to use machine learning and take that advantage that we already have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, we will open the questions to the floor. Just take one question, please, due to time constraints.
It's one question, technically two, but what was the sample size of the data set?
It was around like 200 students were taken for the study. So it was like divided into 80 to 20 as training and testing.
And did you do any kind of clustering analysis to see how those identified factors relate to each other?
No, we did not. Yeah, okay. We only focused on the machine learning part here.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, sure.
Short, I carried out this study looking at the integration of ChatGPT into higher education to promote critical thinking among the students. So I'll just give you a bit of background first. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Electrical and Mechanical Engineering at DKIT, and in 2022 I started the MALT course. So it's a Master's in Learning and Teaching. Also in that year, ChatGPT came out. So as part of my research project for the MALT, I decided I wanted to do something in this area. There was a lot of hype at that time about artificial intelligence. We're all going to lose our jobs. So it was very important that we start educating our students in the area of AI, give them some exposure to it. There was a survey carried out in DKIT about staff training needs, and the main thing to come out of that was academic integrity and artificial intelligence. So a lot of the CAs maybe we traditionally had before AI might be vulnerable to AI, so they perhaps need to be reassessed. So I decided I was going to do a research project in this area of AI in education, focusing on ChatGPT. So I started my literature review of the potential uses of AI in education, and there's much promises. Personally, I think long-term personal tutors is one of the best potential uses of AI in education. The idea that an individual student can have a tutor 24/7 whenever they want it. The tutor can give them individual feedback, pace them through the content at their own pace, do out specific learning plans based on where they're weak or strong. So I really like this idea, and I know that Khan Academy have developed an app called Khan Amigo, or a little chatbot that can tailor the learning experience for individuals. So long term, I think this is a really promising area. But short term, I didn't go into this as my project. Here's an image of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and when they started building this early on, they could see that the foundation wasn't right. You can build a magnificent building on top of it, but if your foundation isn't right at the start, it is problematic. And with large-scale language models, which ChatGPT is, there's some fundamental issues there. So as part of my literature review, I came across a couple of different words to help describe some of the issues with large-scale language models. It's referred to as a stochastic parrot. Like a parrot, it can repeat words, and it doesn't understand the real meaning of the words. It's just using lots and lots of training data to come up with responses to prompts. It's referred to as prone to hallucinations. A lot of the stuff we get from, say, the likes of ChatGPT is quite good, quite accurate information, but every now and again it can throw in something that's totally BS. And this can be quite dangerous because it can look maybe at first plausible, the information, but it can be very dangerous to have this in your content. So with regard to using ChatGPT in education, UNESCO have developed a guideline, and you should ask yourself, does it matter if the output is true? And if the answer is no, it's safe to use ChatGPT. And if the answer is yes, well, it's a bit of a grey area whether you can use it or not. So I decided for my project, I'm going to restrict it to these cases where the output doesn't matter. So keeping this restriction in mind, I decided to look at using ChatGPT 3.5 to promote critical thinking. And my participants were second year undergraduate mechanical engineering students based at DKIT, where I teach. I developed a control group from students who had previously done an assignment back in 2022, and I performed a bit of an intervention and got some students to redo a similar assignment in 2023, and they made up my experimental group. With a good uptake in participants, 16 out of 25 possible students made up the control group, and 19 out of 27 made up the experimental group. My intervention consisted of two things. First of all, the experimental group were asked to take the question that the control group answered and get ChatGPT to answer it instead. Then from that reply given by ChatGPT, the experimental group were asked to critically analyze it. Now, they were given a few guidance prompts on what they should be doing as part of this critical analysis exercise. I performed a quantitative analysis using a critical thinking rubric, which allowed me to score each assessment from 1 low to 4 high. I had 16 control group assessments, 19 experimental group analysis, and I had 19 responses from ChatGPT, and I scored all of these 1 to 4 and presented them in the following graph. So if we look here, we can see the green corresponds to the experimental group, and a score of 1 was ascertained by about 16% of my experimental group. So taking all this data then, I used it to work out the mean and standard deviation of the control and experimental group. And you can see here that they're pretty much the same, the mean, with a slight increase in the standard deviation of the experimental group. The data itself wasn't normally distributed, so I had to perform a Mann-Whitney U-test or a Wilson-Coxon-Ransom test that illustrated that there was no statistical difference between the control group findings and experimental group findings. So my intervention didn't have any significant difference overall. But there was some notable interesting developments. You can see here my control group, initially half the students got a score of 2, whereas my experimental group, that was down near 20%. So this extra 30%, some of them went higher, and we had actually an increase in number of students scoring above the mean score for the experimental group, and unfortunately some of the students scored lower. So we had 16% here of the students from the experimental group got a score of 1, whereas previously we had no control group students getting a score of 1. Having the numerical data on the previous slide was very beneficial, but to further understand it, I performed a thematic analysis. So when I was scoring each of these assessments for critical thinking scores, I also at the same time generated codes, and these codes were based on critical thinking performance. So I had lots of codes for the experimental group, the control group, and also ChatGPT's responses. And then I went to analyze these codes in subsets. So you see the problem I had with that 16% of students in the experimental group who got a CT score of 1. To understand why they got that score, I just looked at the codes, the thematic analysis codes for the 16 students, and the theme that came out of that was lack of engagement. I'm not 100% sure why there was a lack of engagement. Was it time constraints for the students? Maybe the assessment was a little unclear. So having a look at the literature, probably the best way to overcome this is to get the students to do a draft of the problem, the lecturer to revise the draft, give them some feedback before they proceed. When analysing this data, I was concerned if the quality of ChatGPT's response would influence the students' performance. So let's say ChatGPT did an excellent response with a critical thinking score of 4. Well, it might be harder for that student to critically analyse it because it's quite a good response. If ChatGPT did a poor response, a critical thinking score of 1, one might think that would be easier for the student to spot mistakes and maybe discuss shortcomings of ChatGPT. So I investigated to see if there was a relationship between ChatGPT's critical thinking score and the students' critical thinking score. So first of all, looking at ChatGPT, there is a variation from its responses. We've seen that most of its scores were a 2, but there was some scores of higher and lower. So to analyse the data, I did out a plot with ChatGPT's critical thinking score as the independent variable and the student's critical thinking score as the dependent variable. And if we just look at one of the points here, say this point here, we can see it's blue, so it represents one data point. For this case, ChatGPT gave a response with a CT score of 1, and then a student had to go off and analyse that response, and that student got a CT score of 4. So I did out these for all the data, and then I fitted a line to it to see if there was a clear relationship between these two, if ChatGPT's CT score was actually influencing the student score, and it was a very poor fit. which indicates to me that there is not a clear linkage between the two of these variables. So looking exclusively at the codes from the ChatGPT responses, I came up with 3 themes. And the first is inconsistencies. You can see even with the CT scores there, the quality of the response from ChatGPT was quite varied. Second theme is the quality of information. Sometimes it got it very, very accurate, but every now and again it would throw in one of its hallucinations. Now this can be beneficial from the actual exercise I'm doing because it can challenge the students and offers a good learning opportunity. The third theme I came out with is the depth of knowledge. Oftentimes the reply by ChatGPT can be quite superficial. It maybe doesn't expand, or it might link different thoughts within the one question together. So this is something that you need to be conscious of if you're implementing it. I looked at comparing the codes from the experimental group to the control group, and I could see there still existed a lack of depth of discussion in certain students. There was a noted increase in the explanation of information. The codes from the control group focus very much on stating good information, whereas the codes from the experimental group, you could see that there was more reflection, and I guess that was informed by the knowledge that ChatGPT had this ability to hallucinate. So here's my references. I thank you very much for your time, and I welcome any discussion.
So thank you very much. As I said, I tried to keep it bright because I was under the impression that we'd be going to lunchtime. We'd be all happy and leave to get out of here. But I want to say that this is my second time speaking at a conference, so the imposter syndrome is very strong today, especially with all the fantastic speakers we already had. So before I start, what I want to say is, according to the Wall Street Journal, 21% of freelance creative jobs dropped since the advent of ChatGPT. And in the creative sector, a lot of jobs are reliant on that freelance jobs to work additional and have that additional income. And as we move towards a creative sector, image processing, creatives, creating movies, editing, audio, as a person who worked in the back of a van editing and using these editing suites, you put blood, sweat, and tear into this, and you put a whole lot of time into it. But I had the privilege this year of working as the assistant lecturer on the Bachelor of Arts in Creative Media and Storytelling. Now, this is a fantastic module because it prepares people to work across marketing, jobs, industry, enterprise, social entrepreneurship. And my role was in the lead module of the website design and social media presence. I was very conscious, however, that AI was going to play an important role in the journey the students took, but also in how I was going to manage and how I was going to assess this. So I always had 2 questions in the top of my head. This is, why was AI going to be inevitably going to be a challenge? And how could I then support the students to use AI or to leverage what's already there? Because as someone who's gone through academic writing and who's assessed written pieces, we all know the ChatGPT and how it's integrated. It can be really challenging to identify, is it a framework, is it a tool, is it a resource? So I came into it with some of those questions. But as an educator, I suppose my primary role, my passion is ensuring that students at the end of the module, at the end of the program, are prepared to take on the challenges and tasks in their career. So as I suppose in the same journey the students took, I said, if I was to use Runway, if I was to use Canva, if I was to use some of these issues today to support me, looking at the lifelong learner, are they confident and are they ready to take on some of the tasks that they've had? So I used Runway as an example to create a prompt, create an image of a lifelong learner reflecting on the skills and competencies. And what I drew up was what we've referred to, what some of you have referred to already. This was some of the best images that I could capture from Runway. because the prompt, I suppose that wasn't exactly the right prompt, but because the prompt was quite abstract, it did struggle with that. And what I had is primarily a social bias was very clear in the images of a lifelong learner. For the most part, they were all male in their mid 50s to 60s for the most part. And then the image as well, it couldn't quite capture an abstract thought. And it was quite interesting to see that if a student was to put in that prompt and they were to become reliant in AI, then they lacked that creativity, they lacked that ability to communicate or to address the needs of the audience, of the viewer. And by just jumping to AI, we miss their ability to, I suppose, reflect and really make that connection with the audience. Now, that's not to say that they can't do it and some people don't have a particular skill, but it has a skill that we need to develop as well. So here we have AI coming into their lives, having an output that may or may not particularly suit their needs, but does it do the job? Perhaps. I'm sure maybe some of you have seen Chubby the cat, and maybe if you haven't, maybe you're just as well. But this was a creation and it has become a phenomenon online or a viral. This is a story of Chubby from MP Minds 500. And he's created a number of completely AI generated images from audio, visual, to even songs, dubs. Billie Eilish was recently sending on once because her music was in it. But it's widely streamed and it's not censored. And some of the issues of Chubby's life, and if you ever check it out, I think is that Tales of AI Cats, if you've the time to check it out. But the stories that they cover are shoplifting, abduction, road rage, and a shark attack at a beach. And the children are left distraught, and there's a hero's journey, eventually there's a happy ending towards it. But people are having an emotional response to something that was created by AI, that was done at a few taps, a few word prompts, and it has had an impact on the social side of things. So this is quite a powerful tool at the hands of people who are maybe just willing to get some attention, to get some trends, to get some likes. And it was a huge factor that we wanted to consider. So what we tried to establish was, when our students were working on this module, was the AI going to be a toolkit or was it going to be a threat? And when we're using those tools, the question arose, if we're going to use them, if we're going to rely on them, then if I was going to assess that, where did that creative process start? Was it from the prompts that they put into the tools like Midjourney or Runway or Firefly and DALL-E 3? And we won't get into IP and all sorts of things like that because it can be quite complicated, but it's quite clear as well. But do I assess their ability to input the prompt? Do I assess their ability of how well it meets the audience? Where does that creativity begin? And also, if it's a conversation, if I'm tracking that journey, did it start in a prompt that they input into ChatGPT? Was it a conversation they had with a tutor and Microsoft Copilot when they extracted the information? So it becomes very blurred. We're actually a creative process where you get your ideas, what your IP is, and where your structure comes from. It can be quite challenging to actually nail that down. So again, with the final perspective in mind, what I wanted to do is make sure that the competencies and the skills that they would have at the end of the program would stand to them for the life journey, to be able to adapt and to be, I suppose, flexible in how they approach things. And I'm a strong advocate of skills, but also competencies. And I think competencies is give you that self-assurance, that sense of self-efficacy. And I took this from the LifeComp framework. And this really informed the process of how I was going to form an assessment or design a rubric. So there's things like self-regulation, critical thinking, and growth mindset that we wanted to embed through the module. And we had skills, practical and professional skills set up, photography, cinematography, audio. But then at the same time, here we had people who were creating an output, something that was going to have a clear impact on an audience. And for that, we needed to delve a little bit deeper rather than just practical skills. So we looked at self-efficacy, ethical awareness, and a sense of responsibility overall of what their product was. And we had many good conversations about how those skills were important for sustainability, how it would lead to entrepreneurship or enterprise, but also social entrepreneurship and communicating and working with communities. So when we're looking at our rubric and our assessment, and when I was looking at what I was going to assess, I asked, how was I going to integrate this through conversations, through reflective practice, through the conversations with our students, and how we were going to assess this? And some of the key areas that we came up with were creating a strong creative foundation. The technological proficiency were established in other modules, which we're then bringing into their own skills. Adaptability, lifelong learning, collaboration, and networking skills. And we embedded in all our labs and all our workshops an opportunity to work in groups of 4 when they were creating and working together. Critical thinking and ethical awareness, and more so AI ethical awareness, and the resilience and growth mindset. Now, these don't happen overnight, but they were, I suppose, embedded in our conversations, were embedded in the practices and the working labs that we had together. And it really was a very collaborative, I suppose, journey that we took with the students, with myself. And I think that's something that the student voice is so central to it. So as they are taught, I had authentic assessment in mind. I wanted to have as realistic an experience as they would in I suppose, in enterprise or in industry. The first aspect was social media presence, and they had to create an online profile, which they understood the impact of audience, that they understood that when they were creating a social media presence, they were doing far more than just creating content. They had a connection with the audience. Within the social media presence, we looked at narrative structure, visual consistency, clarity, and coherence. But we took creativity and innovation and audience impact as a key part of that. The understanding and the perspective that what they were creating, what they were sending out had an impact was going to be quite a central part to our assessments. And that's where a lot of our conversations came around. Similar then, we had to create a web design, and web design was linked to the social media presence. And the skills of creating content, creating their own images, they did use DALL-E, they did use ChatGPT. It was integrated within the process. But there was a very open and transparent conversation about when it was used, how it was used, and why it was used. So there was never any, I suppose, hidden agenda or hidden curriculum there, that students understood why they were using it, and they could explain how they use it, and then they made it their own. And that's what the creative, that's where the innovation came into it. And we can see here the web design, again, we're focusing on the clarity of attention and impact. And I think oftentimes when people are looking at the final product, if they're looking that they're disseminating information or they're connecting with someone, often what we see nowadays on TikTok or social media is the things that create the greatest sensation, the things that have the greatest impact. And unfortunately, things like Chubby, where people have strong emotional reaction to, we have to have students and people working in these careers can actually analyze and assess if it was ethical, if what they have created was moral, and that has to start at a very early stage. So what I would like to kind of think the final thoughts is, AI is a resource to support creativity. It's very difficult to assess where it begins and where it ends. How AI is used effectively, professionally, ethically, and transparently requires further consideration. It's an evolving area. Even if we look at Runway or Canva, their IP is a gray area. You're allowed to use it, I'm allowed to, I have ownership of it, but somebody else could duplicate and replicate that same thing. So the copyright itself. So I might have IP, but I don't have the right to copyright it because it was generated by AI. So it's quite a challenge area, but we need to have conversations about it. We need to accept that AI is a tool, it's a resource, but using it well, using it effectively, ethically, and I suppose with inclusion and accessibility for all, they should be the targets as we kind of design. So a few questions that I always have, or I would like to think when we're applying AI, is does the student feel confident at the end that they're able to adapt and be flexible and use their skills? Do they feel prepared to have these unforeseen challenges in their job market? And can they pivot? And that comes down to the ability to work well with others, to analyze and to I suppose, to think critically. And have they acquired the right set of skills to be confident that they have something to offer? We don't want someone coming out who's self-doubt. We want people to feel, have a high level of self-efficacy, to be confident that they can contribute. And sometimes it's just a recognition of that and acknowledgement through those journals, through the reflective, and just through practice, that they can adapt with technology. I think that has to be a journey we do with the students. So on that, Fog mention, as they say. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions at the end, go Mahago.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that presentation. I'm just opening it to the floor for 5 minutes. Does anybody have anything they want to ask? Any questions?
Okay. Let me just test this before. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That was really excellent.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you come across so engaging. I'd say your students love you.
I don't know about that.
Oh, I do. As part of interest, did the students evaluate the whole process, and what did they make of it themselves? Because I'm sure comparing it to other modules. that they
Well,
attend.
Absolutely. This was the first year we ran it as social media, and storytelling was embedded as in how well they could capture an audience, how well they can engage with them. And so there was a lot of conversation back and forth of, I suppose, not so much the AI. The conversation never came up about AI, but it was the quality of what they were creating. It became more of an ethical and moral of recognizing an audience that they wanted to engage with and have that conversation and actually contribute. So we began, I suppose, working on social media, but they all started to recognize, oh, maybe social entrepreneurship is a path for me. Maybe I can actually use my skills to have a greater impact. So that conversation stemmed into that module, and it just kind of opened up their horizons through conversation. I mean, a lot of it was a structured lecture, but then we had those labs where the conversation was. So I do think they were quite engaged, and they could see the potential of, like Chubby, the negative effects, but also that they had the skills to counteract that or to analyze the standard or quality that other people were creating. So it was very much myself and the students working well together. So thank you for that.
I want to throw this.
I think we had a question from I think we had a question from Sue. I think.
Sue, do you have a question?
Down here, down the front.
Just slide it.
That's great, thank you.
Take it easy, Sue.
It's more of an observation suggestion, really.
Yeah.
So I teach digital marketing at my university, and it was more of a formative assessment they got, looking at using AI to generate images, but the conversation that came out of it, the reflection on was it useful or not? So one student was doing a project on his local gym and how they use social media. So he was trying to create some images, and actually he understands boxing, and the images that came out were completely wrong, and he could actually critique why that was wrong. So having those conversations, the reflective part could be part of your assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's good.
And the process is as important, I think, as the product at the end.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
it's fascinating.
perfect. Thanks so much, Sue. Yeah, I'll be taking that on board for sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Final question?
Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Oh,
Just
thanks
to
very much.
follow on from Sue's comment there, was there any technical consideration given to, when we're talking about prompts like generate an image of a cat, whereas when you get into the design area, for example, in photography, you have f-stop for focal length and stuff like that. Was that covered in the program, when you're talking about web design?
That is covered in the photography and the cinematography, but it wasn't brought into the web design. They could create their own content. Of course, they were, a lot of students went out and they create their own photography. Some created short snippets for the web design. But when they were trying to find something on a grade A, that's when they started using DALL-E and the different audio files and things like that. So they did have the technical skills that they could then apply for, I suppose, a more work-based approach. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It's great.
All right, Gurmeen Nuggets.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wait a second. We'll just see.
All right, so today I'm just talking to you about our assessment redesign framework. that we've been designing under our NTutor project. So first of all, just a little bit about the project. It's called GenAI N3. And really this is about scaffolding staff and students in this sort of new environment we find ourselves in. So it's about providing supports and putting them in place for the various different challenges that we're encountering that we're not used to, I suppose. And what we're doing here is we're trying to focus on the broader application of generative AI. So we're moving beyond just academic integrity. We're talking about training, we're talking about lots of other things, providing resources and so on. And we're also drawing on expertise from across the sector because there's lots of pockets of fantastic work going on. So we were trying to just bring it all together so that we can create a greater impact and also that we can sort of create high quality resources. The project areas, just to give you a tiny bit of an overview, setting up a national network. So that's bringing people together who are involved in the conversations around generative AI and education. Also establishing a national hub where we can house resources. And the focus here is very much on open resources, so they'll be accessible to everybody and adaptable in their own contexts. We've been rolling out AI Play workshops. So these are spaces where staff and students can get used to playing around with AI and exploring the limitations and the possibilities. We also are running a hackathon, and that's coming up later on this semester. So to focus on some of the key issues surrounding generative AI in education and to see how we can tackle those collaboratively. And then we're also going to produce a crowdsourced book at the end of the project, just to showcase a lot of the resources and different research that's after emerging from it. Okay, so one of the key aspects is the assessment redesign framework. And the reason we decided to focus on this is because assessment, as we know, is absolutely integral to our practice as educators. And it's also important that the people who are involved in this national network project, they're a combination. There's educators, people who are in the classroom with the students and who are getting the on-the-ground experience. And then we also have instructional designers, and we have people from different levels, you know, of management and so on within their institutions. So really, we recognize that we needed this sort of level of support for staff when they were trying to think about how their assessments needed to be adapted in this new context. So the framework itself, then, I'm just going to give you a little insight into it here. So I'll take you out to have a skim through the framework. So in our introduction, we're just giving a bit of context, and we're talking about how traditional assessment methods such as essays or unsupervised exams have high risk potential. And then just a bit about how AI detection tools have been emerging, but we still don't have any that we can totally rely on. So we're just trying to shift the focus from detection to prevention, and as Kath Ellis espouses, from detecting cheating to detecting learning. And that's what this framework is about. So our objectives, we're looking at assessments and we're just saying, well, actually, which ones are suitable for generative AI, which are not. We're looking at a risk assessment around the ones that are most susceptible to AI misuse. And then we're going to have a think about what we can do about that. And we're also looking about how we can potentially integrate generative AI into the assessment process as well. So you'll see here the very familiar Bloom's taxonomy. The reason that's in there is we're encouraging a shift towards higher order thinking skills. So to move away from the reproduction of knowledge and look very much at application of knowledge. So skills such as critical analysis, problem solving, critical evaluation, any of these higher order skills. And also then we're just suggesting that this reflects a better real world application and prepares students for this new AI enabled society and workplace that they'll be going into. So these are just the verbs to help in sort of designing assessments that incorporate higher order thinking skills. This is the risk assessment. So what we've done here is we've got a table and it triages different types of assessments. And now, again, this is not exhaustive. We couldn't possibly have every single or cover every single eventuality, but it's just, I suppose, a bit of common sense and adapting. So, for instance, we have essays or written assignments that are just, you know, a single artifact is being submitted. So these are the highest risk because, as we all know, our AI can generate pretty high quality content, and it's very difficult for us to detect whether it's original or not. And then we're suggesting mitigation steps. So for instance, requiring multiple drafts, have oral defenses, follow-up questions, and so on. We also have things like open book exams, unsupervised open books or remote exams. And I know that these can be high risk. So like, for instance, I suppose with the open book, when we came to COVID and we were shifting and doing the online stuff, a lot of people misinterpreted what open book exams were supposed to be about. I mean, the intention was that they're about application of knowledge, but in essence, a lot of educators just simply moved what they were doing inside the classroom onto their online platform, and they weren't really examining application or higher order skills. It was still about testing knowledge, and this is sort of defeating the purpose, really, because now, as we know, AI can actually do that for them. Similarly with quizzes, you know, I know from myself using online low stakes quizzes with my students, I had an instance where they're using their own devices and they had a pop-up window and were using that then to sort of fill in their answers. So luckily, there was some integrity in the classroom and their peers weren't a bit happy about this and actually brought it forward and said, hang on a second, this is not fair. So we had to address that. So we're just looking at high, medium, low risk. So the lowest risk, oral presentations. So when they're there and AI can't actually assist them directly when they're standing in front of you doing an oral presentation. So we've got lots of different possibilities there. We also look at things like using different media, such as e-portfolios, reflective journals, vlogs, and blogs. They can be used to accompany larger pieces of work or even as standalone assessments. And I think the point about this is when we have individualized elements that are based on specific student experience or specific scenarios within the classroom, it's far more difficult for them to use AI to complete those type of activities. We also have a section in here on postgraduate programs. And while most postgraduate work is very closely supervised, we are also suggesting that, yes, there are other things we can do. So for instance, to add pinch points throughout the research journey. So checking in where there are oral presentations around at different points. So for instance, at the literature review point or chapter discussions or so on. And also to have that reflective journal documenting the thought process throughout the journey as a low stakes complement. And thought postgraduate programs, we're talking about having increased collaboration and peer learning involved in those. So the next thing then is looking at integrating generative AI into the assessment process and deciding if it's appropriate or not. So for instance, there are different categories here. So if you look at the nature of the task, like what are you asking the student to do? And if you're asking the student, you know, if you want to test their writing skills, well then generative AI is going to be a big no-no. Because that would just defeat the whole purpose. You wouldn't be able to assess their writing skills if they're using generative AI. Whereas if they're at a higher level, and for instance, they're submitting a dissertation, they could certainly use AI in terms of refinement or checking the strength of their arguments and so on. You know, so there are different levels to this. Okay, so we have Leon Furs in here. I think everybody is possibly familiar with Leon Furs and the assessment scale. at this point. So he has some lovely graphics, which lead us from using no AI all the way up to full integration of AI, and he breaks those down. And then we have the Lewin Bridgman model from University of Sydney, where they simplify it even further and they divide it into 2 tracks. So we have a secure track where there's no AI, and these are supervised assessments and assessment of learning, they describe it as. And then track 2, they describe as open, and this is where there's responsible use of AI. And there's another clear graphic here about that. And I suppose the main point about integrating AI into assessment or not, as the case may be, is that the communication has to be extremely clear with the students. And that's why these simplified infographics are actually quite useful to integrate into your own practices. The process is something that comes up quite a lot when we're talking about assessment redesign, but what does it actually mean? So what we're talking about here is assessments that reveal the learning process. So for instance, having that reflective journal tracking the learning, the drafts or the sketches where we can see the learning is being built upon bit by bit, or staged assessments, or this iterative feedback cycle where they're submitting a draft, you're giving feedback, then the next one builds on it, and so on. And then there are lots of benefits for this there. Further considerations, I'm just going to skim through here. So we have, for instance, consider the time investment. It's going to take the educator. So for instance, the time versus impact and the type of assignments. So there's a little graphic there about that. Recognizing the fact that we need institutional supports at a high level to resource us, to give us time to retrain if we need professional development, and to support us, I suppose, by giving us very clear guidelines. And then I put in post-plagiarism here because this is another consideration. Sarah Eaton has a fantastic infographic, and she talks about how we're going to transcend the whole meaning of plagiarism, that it's no longer relevant in this sort of new context. So there's some nice ideas there about moving beyond it. And then we just sum it up with some tips for the assessment redesign. So I'm just going to turn off that, and there's a reading list that comes on in at the end as well to suggest some resources. Okay, so just bringing that together then, I'm going to draw from Ethan Mollick, who I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with because he's very active in terms of AI and education. He's suggesting that AI is not the problem any more than the internet is the problem. And both of these things just make cheating easier. But he's encouraging us to focus on the positives and spend more time worrying about, or not worrying about the former, but worrying about how we can use AI to actually enhance the learning experience. So what we're talking about then is we're trying to move on from this whole catching the learners out, because that creates a bit of a negative learning environment for the students. We want a positive environment where they can enjoy the learning process and with integrity. So we're talking about looking at our own practices and just seeing, are there ways I can make a difference here? How can I improve what I'm doing to enhance that student learning experience through assessment? Focusing on higher order skills with multifaceted assessments that have low stakes components and high stakes components and are assessing different things. We're not talking about over assessment here. We're talking about balancing it. Embracing collaboration and peer learning, so application of knowledge and real world sort of problem solving. And also, if possible, to involve the learners in that assessment process, a UDL approach, where they're involved in the narrative around the type of assessment and indeed around designing marking rubrics, if possible, because the more invested they are in the process, I think the higher quality work that will come from that. So overall, we're trying to create this culture of integrity rather than this negative culture where we're just trying to catch people out. So who should we be following? These are some of the people that I really enjoy and that produce high quality materials. And they all just happen to be Australian. The Australians are really leading out quite strongly in this area at the moment. So they're there for you in the presentation. You can have a look at later on. And that's me. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
I'd like to introduce Chiquita Gamage, and her presentation is AI in education. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I was wondering why my presentation is not coming. So yeah. So anyway, so I myself, Madhuri, I am a PhD student here in ATU Galway. And I'm also a student champion with NTutor. So thank you to NTutor, ATU, and Digital Education to provide me this opportunity to present today. So this is the work that I will be presenting collectively. We have done with Chetaka, Danushi, and myself. And most of the work is mostly done by Chetaka and Danushi. So please be kind with the questions with me. But anyway, so coming for like little bit giving myself a background, because we are talking about AI. So I myself, I am doing PhD with Marine and Freshwater Research Center. So I'm basically working on this deep learning model, which will help to predict the marine heat wave, which in turn will help to do early warning predictions for the aquaculture site in aquaculture industry, because somewhere there's a speculation that marine heat wave is really impacting the aquaculture industry here. So that is where my work is. So I have seen the artificial intelligence or deep learning, how it has evolved in the field of my area, which is marine science. And also I come from a computer science background. So when I was doing masters, at that time I changed to atmospheric and ocean science. And at that time, because I was from computer science background, and I saw the scope of artificial intelligence in the field of climate or marine science. So that is where, like, from there to now, when I see the impact that AI has on marine science is spectacular. It's really remarkable to see that, and I myself like doing some work on that. So, so today, like whatever I will be presenting, it is just what is like how is AI doing in education, a bibliometric analysis. So this is just a table of content which we'll be going through quickly, and coming to just. I think we have wonderful presentation from people about AI, and we know like how its application is there now. AI, I was talking about marine science, then creative art, and like many other sectors. So it doesn't need much of an introduction about it, but we will be focusing on integration of AI in education and how it is transforming our traditional learning environment. So the purpose is basically to present a bibliometric analysis to understand the current state, plus trend in AI, and also how the AI technologies like machine learning, NLP, smart classroom, how it is reshaping our education system. So basically, despite like substantial research, a comprehensive review synthesizing recent trend and research theme was lacking. That is where we are trying to address some facts. So the research questions we are trying to address here is, what are the recent trend in AI with education context? What are the key themes and emerging areas of interest? It is not only the current topic, current themes that we are talking about, but also the tendency of the themes which might evolve in the near future. And how have publication patterns evolved over time? And so from the literature review, it highlights some critical perspective about AI in education. So one of the key author, he states that it is currently emerging field in education technology, but the problem is that there is a lot of lack of critical reflection of challenges and risks. Very rightly, as said by, as already presented earlier, that we need conversation. We need deeper conversation about it. We cannot avoid it. Situation is such that we have the prevalence of AI is such that we need deeper conversation about it. So when we will have conversation, that is where we can take immediate actions in our institutional policies, in schools and universities, because the decision that we will be making today will be really impacting our lives and also the future generations as well. And no doubt the opportunities is huge. There is like there is large language models, which are like impacting the transformative technology in educations. So it's basically like we have a huge scope of AI, but we are in a battle where we are trying to bring in like which will be like a more professional way, ethical way, plus transparent way to bring in the AI in education. So, but it is not only about the technology that we are talking about. It comes to the other perspective of cultural, social, economical, ethical, and psychological dimension of education as well. So the methodology that we have just used a software, bibliometric software from on R for comprehensive bibliometric analysis. And the steps we have used is data collection from Web of Science for the past 5 years. And then we have done the performance analysis, science mapping, which I will talk much deeper as we go through the slides. So this is the overall methodology that we have used. So we have used the Web of Science database and the keyword that you can see that we have used to just really filter out the education and artificial intelligence. And you can see there are a lot of, like in the first search, there has been a lot of articles, but we have done the filtering with the number of year we are considering and the type of article we are considering. So we have filtered out, and then we got finally like 2,829 articles, which we fed into the bibliometric R tool, and then did the analysis and then the presentation of the results. So talking about the findings, so interestingly, if we see the publication trend, the left-hand side presents the annual scientific productions, and then the right-hand side presents the average citations per year. So interestingly, what we can see is that after 2020, it has like shooted high. There is an exponential rise, which is interesting because there is a time when COVID was there, and there was a huge shift in the way we were taking education. Online platform came, digital, so that might have given a shift to the interest of people, of researcher out there. But interestingly, also you see like a citation, but average citation per year has decreased. So that might be because there is increase of publications. So to get a citation in one particular study, like the distribution, like the citation pattern has been diluted and distributed. So that might be reason for a decline in the average citation per year. Coming to this, just gives the overview about the key publication sources and authors which are really playing a role here. One of the author who is Javaki Richer, he has done a really good work on giving a good background and systematic study, and he has given a good background about AI in education, and he has played one of the key role in AI in education. And this is a co-citation map. So here you can see different clusters and different colors. So these are basically the keyword or the themes which occur together in a literature. So they are like kind of closely related. So on the red clusters, you can see there is this term education, artificial intelligence, and students coming in. So these are like kind of maybe represent education practices that we are trying to figure out. Plus with that also there comes the term like engagement, perception, attitude. Those are like the psychological behavior terms. So those also like plays a role, like how we are, like a student is responding to the learning behavior of AI. And coming to the green cluster, you can see all of the acceptance, user acceptance terms are there, like user acceptance, technological acceptance role. And similarly, if you go to the blue side, we can see the advanced technology, which is virtual reality, learning analytics, and big data. So all those are like kind of clustered. So overall, we can say that AI in education is multifaceted, like our advanced technological innovation, user acceptance, plus educational practices are all together playing a crucial role in it. This is another a thematic map which has 4 quadrants in it. So the more right you go, it is more relevant, and the more above you go, it is like more developed area or more developed key theme. So the modern theme which you see on the right hand side, it is mainly which is driving right now the key themes which are driving the AI in education right now, which is educational students and artificial intelligence. And on the emerging and declining thing, you can see like how we are like, it's more of our response, how we are trying to accept that AI in education. So it is more of like emerging key themes which we can see from the graph. Next comes the factorial analysis. So factorial analysis is based on like 2x and y. You can see dimension 1. So dimension 1, if in simple term, if I say dimension 1 in the x-axis, if you go further right, it just means that people are talking more about it. It's like not currently in a developed phase, but people are really interested, like how are we going to accept AI in education and everything. So people are more interested about the acceptance thing of the new technology. And these on the y-axis, you can see like more of the key themes that people kind of already like know, kind of which people know about it. And the key recommendation of the insights which we can take from here is that we can really enhance user acceptance AI tool, leverage AI for personalized learning experiences. We can incorporate AI into virtual reality for immersive education, and develop AI-powered assessment tools, utilize AI to support educator professional development. So in conclusion, I would like to highlight is that we can really see there is a notable surge in scholarly interest and research output in the integration of AI in education over the past few years. And the analysis reveals the foundational themes, which we saw there were some words like motivation, perception, attitude, quality, self-efficacy are the central to understand and improve the higher education through AI. And themes like AI user acceptance and the technology acceptance models are identified as crucial yet underdeveloped areas, which suggest a need of further research in this area. And one thing that we saw is about pandemic. So the study attributes the exponential rise in AI-related educational research and application partly to the pandemic-induced shift in education, which has really accelerated the adoption of innovative technologies like AI. So these findings really provide a valuable insight for educators, administrators, and policymakers, which can help to make the future decision in our field of education. So here are a few differences, and yeah, I would like to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Keita. I can open the questions to the floor now.
We have a question up here in the back. Very surprised to not see academic integrity or cheating be one of the themes there.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Were this article all open source articles, or are they some like paid database? I'm from the United States, so wondering if you were able to analyze the subscription-based database articles.
Okay, so I think I can go to that part. So basically, yeah. So it is like that we have tried to get all the public like articles which are like cited. So like we have filtered it in a way that the articles which are which have been like cited well. So I think I answered it. Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Oh, not
rather
the
than the
actual,
data,
okay,
not the publication basis. So it's citations you were using, not the publication.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, we'll try it. You ready?
Good catch.
Can I ask, what were you filtering? Was it the title of the article, the abstract? What data were you filtering?
Oh, okay. So those filters are basically like the years and if you go on Web of Science, there are different categories. So basically those filters, and also including only the English documents, not the non-English ones, and also those are like which are like peer-reviewed journals. So like filterings are done basis on that. Yeah.
Okay, but see the way you've identified 2,936 articles there, were you then reading those or reading the abstracts to pull out keywords, key terminology?
Sorry, which one? So,
when you go into your analysis, you've identified keywords and trends. Where did you get those words from? Was it the title of the paper that you identified, or?
Oh, the keywords that you are talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is that the word that has occurred in the literature, like when you see like the title of the literatures, right?
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do you want to hit anybody? I'm gonna do it.
Have we any other questions? No?
All right, thank you very much, Chiquita. We can conclude this session now. Dinner, I think, is being served in
Lunch.
lunch even is being served in 2 minutes. Or
Yeah,
even
so
early.
thanks very much.